Hey y'all, it's Miss Osborne. I'm going to be demonstrating the document analysis for the African imperialism documents that we did in class. While you're watching, you can pay attention because I'll be writing evidences in green. And then all analysis will be written in blue. After I finish analyzing these documents, all of the documents will be available on the Google Drive folder off of my website. So looking at Document A is a map of Africa and the various countries that had taken over Africa. As you can see down here, the European colonies had taken over Africa, and they list them out. The British, the French, the Germans, Italians, Portuguese, Belgians, and the Spanish. And then there's still some independent African countries like Liberia and Ethiopia. This map very obviously is looking at the political competition between the different European countries. And you can see that because the specific pieces of evidence here, this whole part of Africa is all France, while this entire part of Africa is all Great Britain. And so the evidence here, the specific piece of evidence, is that only two countries remained independent. And more exclusively, Britain and France competed against one another for land in Africa. And you can add the different European countries in here as well. You could talk about the Germans, you could talk about the Italians. You know, if you look on the map here, the Germans owned all of the Congo, the Italians. I mean, there's lots of different countries that you could talk about. Britain and France were just the two that I chose. Looking at Document B is mainly looking at, again, the political competition between the two powers. The first one sets up the idea of nationalism, right? That a country's power is based on the number of colonies they have. And different specific pieces of evidence that we can kind of pull out from here is this one's talking about English imperialism. And so one of the main pieces of evidence that we have here is that right here it says this is what England must do or perish or die. It says she must found colonies as fast and as far as she is able. Found meaning that they must set them up, they must establish them, and they want to set up as many colonies as they are able. In addition to that, they not only say that they should seize as many colonies as able, they want to seize every single piece of ground they can set their foot on, and their first aim is to advance the power of England by land and sea by using those colonies. So those colonies directly reflect the power of England. Down here in the second document, it's looking at political competition as well, but instead of England, it's looking at Germany. And directly, they were competing with other nations for power. Specifically, the Germans, if you look through the evidences, the Germans are specifically competing with the British. Okay? It says here, it would be wise if we Germans would learn about colonial skills from the British cousins. Okay? So they're looking to the British to learn about imperialism, okay? And they again say they have a friendly competition. So we know that different European powers are competing against one another for power. It was the #1 trade and sea power. Should the new German Reich wish to prove and maintain its newly won position of power, it will have to take up a culture mission and delay no longer its colonial task. Meaning that they didn't want to wait any longer to have any new colonies. Looking at Document C. Document C is looking at the different technology that was formed that allowed the different countries to receive their power. This is mainly economic, but it also could be considered culturally superiority as well. Economic meaning that like they traded these technologies with the African countries. And then also it's cultural superiority because the European technologies were more advanced than the African technologies, and that led to them to believe that they were better than them. The different evidences we have here, for example, one of the things that they used was the Maxim gun, otherwise known as a machine gun, okay, or then the repeating rifle, which is the same thing as a semi-automatic rifle. They also had a steam engine, they had the electric telegraph, which allowed them to communicate quicker and essentially allowed them to take over much faster than they would have been able to otherwise. Looking at Document D now. Document D really sets us up for understanding economics better because it's a chart of all the different resources that the European countries were able to get from Africa. Okay, some of the evidences we have here. First of all, let's break this chart up. In this column here, we have the different colonies. In this column here, we have all of the raw materials. And then lastly, in this column, these are the industries that the raw materials benefited and were able to make the manufactured goods. Okay, so in this far column, if we look, we're going to look specifically at the Rhodesia, which was one of Great Britain's colonies. So Great Britain was the one that benefited from this. They were able to get copper, zinc, lead, and coal, which allowed them to make coins. It allowed them to make electric wiring and also fuel. Okay? Rhodesia gave Great Britain these, which eventually led to these manufactured goods. Now, if we're going to look at a different one, let's look at Germany. Okay, Germany was able to get these raw materials: coffee, rubber, cotton. Rubber is a really big one because it was what provided the different colonies the needs for tires. Okay, so we can see here they were able to make tires and different fabrics. Those are the textiles. Those are the biggest things. So the colony, Tanganyika of Germany, provided Germany with coffee, rubber, and cotton, which then allowed them to make manufactured goods such as tires and fabrics. Those are the specific pieces of evidence there. Now looking at Document E. Document E is also economic. Okay? The European countries desired a favorable balance of trade. If you remember, we talked about a favorable balance of trade when we looked at European exploration a couple of units ago. in which the favorable balance of trade means that the exports are always going to be more than the imports. Because when the exports are more than the imports, that means that they are making more money. Now, the mother country just means whatever colonizing power it is. So in this one, it's specifically looking at Great Britain. If you see here, the imports are greater than the exports in 1854. This is at the beginning of imperialism. After imperialism, once they have established their role in South Africa, you can see that exports are way more than imports. Whenever exports are more than imports, that means that they're making a profit. And finally, one of the most important documents is Document F. Document F is looking at the white man's burden. It's kind of a complicated piece because it is a little bit more challenging to look through, because it is just like very wordy, and some of the vocabulary we aren't really used to. The white man's burden really is talking about cultural superiority. Okay, because in the white man's burden, it's talking about white men's responsibility to kind of bring up Africa from their more barbaric state. So when we're talking about a burden, we're really talking about the responsibility. So for example, like a lot of you guys feel like you're burdened by your homework. That means you know that you have homework and you have to take care of it, right, in order to get the grade. Okay, so the Europeans really felt burdened by the Africans. They had to take care of them because they felt like otherwise they wouldn't be able to take care of themselves. And we've been talking about this with the idea of social Darwinism. Okay, and so in the actual paragraph it says, "Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed, go bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need." What this is talking about here is that they had to serve the Europeans. Okay, that is their duty, to wait in heavy harness on fluttered folk and while, your new-caught sullen peoples, half devil and half child. Right? They are barbaric. They're childlike. They don't even know anything. You remember, like children don't really know very much. They're learning things, right? And devil kind of characterizing Africans as being more like animalistic. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. So part of their burden was to feed Africans and give them medicine to make the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, watch sloth and heathen folly bring all your hopes to naught. Okay, so sloth means to be laziness. So they're trying to make laziness go away. And heathen means anybody who is not a Christian. So folly is like false. So watch sloth and heathen folly. We've been talking about watch laziness and all those devil practices that the Africans were doing before. Watch them go away. Now that you've watched the video, make sure that you go back and you look at your ACEs writing paragraph, and now you're prepared to pull these specific pieces of evidence out and to organize them into your analysis paragraph. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.